Hello and welcome back to our Sankey diagram tutorial. This is part 5. If you haven't yet, you'll want to go back and watch parts 1 through 4 to get a good grip on where we are and where we're going. So in this part, we will be making our Sankey diagram update dynamically as the model runs. Okay, what does that mean? Let's just run this for a second, get some data in here, and we'll open our diagram. So this diagram is based on flow data, routing data for our flow items between the objects that was just generated by the model run. Now as I continue running the model from where it is, this diagram doesn't update. It is what it is. As you open that interface, this chart diagram, it renders using the data that was available at that time, and it never re-renders. If I close it and reopen it, it's now considering the data that was available right when I opened it. So it's been updated, but again, it's just static. So what we want to do now is make it so that as the model's running, this chart will actually animate, update, show you the current state of the model. Okay, so keep in mind what we've done so far. This custom GUI has a WebKit widget in it. It's using WebKit's renderer to render HTML, JavaScript, web content, really. And Flexsim is generating some of that web content as we open this interface, and that's how it's getting data from the model. So what we've got to do is take that to the next step, so that instead of Flexsim calculating and creating some of that HTML code beforehand, before it renders this, we want Flexsim to be able to directly access the JavaScript objects that are inside this WebKit widget. All right, so the first place we need to go is right into the HTML code of our WebKit widget. So if you recall, everything we've done so far is way down here at the bottom. Remember this is the energy data variable. That's where we're storing the JavaScript object data, the nodes and links that make up that diagram. Nodes and links are attributes in this JavaScript object, and each of them is an array of objects. This is just name objects that tell you the name of the different nodes, and then these objects give you a source, target, and value. So it shows you where a flow item came from, where it went to, and how many flow items have made that journey. So what we need Flexsim to do is dynamically access these JavaScript objects after they've been created and update their values, add new values, and so forth, and then tell the chart, hey, re-render using this new data. Okay, so let's start there, and we will go into our user command. All right, so here's our onEntry trigger. And in this onEntry trigger, we want to use some JavaScript to tell that WebKit window what to do. So we'll declare a new string here and call it JavaScript. And this will be the home for any JavaScript that we want to send to the WebKit window. So when do we need to do things? Anytime that we added something to the global table, for instance, these two sections within the if statements, those are adding new nodes to the nodes global table. If we're adding something new to the nodes global table, it also stands to reason we need to add it to the JavaScript object that might already be live in an open WebKit window. So we'll just want to add some code here. So we'll just append something to the existing JavaScript string. So what do we want to do? Remember the name of that variable back in our HTML widget? It was energy data. Energy data has a nodes attribute in it, and that nodes attribute is a JavaScript array. JavaScript provides a function called push that allows you to push a new element onto that array. So in this case, the element is a JavaScript object, and that's denoted by the squiggly braces. It's got a name attribute, colon, and then the name of the object that we're wanting to push on here. And this is where we use some Flex script. And we do a get name for the in object. Object. Boy, I'm struggling. Okay, object. Now we basically do exactly the same thing right here, but for the current object. If we hadn't seen that current object yet, we also want to push it onto the nodes array. Okay, we're done with the nodes array, but we will be doing something very similar down here in the links array. Okay, we want to come down and say links. We're pushing. Let's kind of separate this over several lines to make it easier to read. And instead of name, we've got source. And it's not a string, but it'll be a number. Let's just get rid of all of this. We've got target. And it'll have a number. And then we've got value. Now if we're just barely adding this link to the list, the value at this time is 0. Nothing has been seen yet. Don't worry, down here where we actually increment values and set table values, that's where we will also set the value in the links of our JavaScript energy data object. Okay, but for now, let's just look at what we've got to do here. So the source, remember we have a source index. It's right up here, the Sankey index. We need to convert it to a string, however. Num to string, Sankey index 0, 0, and it needs a comma after that. We'll do and a comma there. Basically the same thing right here, except for the inobj index. Whoa, actually the inobj index goes there. That's the source, and the Sankey index is the target. Now, keep in mind, these numbers are 1-based, and the JavaScript arrays are 0-based. So we need to decrement these, but there's also one other consideration, and that is that, let's just go look at our dynamic nodes table and the dynamic links table. They're not only 1-based, but they have dummy rows. We've got to get past that as well. So we'll decrement again. Okay, so we've got source, target, value. We're pushing it onto the links array. All right, now down here where we've incremented the value in the global table, set that table num, we'll also want to do some JavaScript to update the value of the JavaScript object. So remember, links is an array, so we'll index into the array, and then whatever index is there, there's an object with source, target, and value properties that we can change. So in this case, we want to update the value property to be equal to some number we'll pull in. And that'll do it. So the number that we want is num2string. And it's just right here. It's whatever we just set in the table. Now we don't need to decrement this. This is, remember, is a value. It's the number of flow items that have gone from source to target. So this isn't 1-based, no dummy rows or anything. It's really just the raw number of flow items that have moved from source to target. Let's put a couple of enters here, and so we've got our num2string. That'll work, but I'll just go ahead and specify width and precision. Okay, I think that's it. Oh, no, it's not. We've got to get that link value. num2string. Okay, so this is the index into the links array. And where was it? Remember, if it didn't exist, we went ahead and calculated it here. It's link index, but again, link index was a row of the global table. So there's two things we have to do. We've got to decrement once to make the global table, to take it from being 1-based to 0-based JavaScript array, and we've got to decrement again because there's a dummy row, so we subtract 2 off of there, and that's good. So we've just pushed any data that needs to be pushed onto the nodes, onto the links. We've updated the link value. Remember, this is an on-entry trigger, so some flow item just entered this, changed one of the values of the links. We've updated that, and now we want to re-render the chart. So let's get all this again. We want to call create chart. And pass in energy data, right? Let's just review this. Create chart command. Create chart, and we pass in energy data so that it can re-render itself. All right, so we've got all that JavaScript there now. We've generated. What do we do with it? Okay, a couple of things. First of all, we want to send it to the HTML, but the HTML's got to be able to handle communication from Flexsim. So to do that, we have to attach a function to some element within the page. So the easiest thing is see what elements are already here and attach it to an existing element. If we needed to, we could create a new element. But anyway, here's the body. So any elements on this page will be under the body. There's these two paragraphs, and this one happens to have an ID, chart. So we can just piggyback right on top of that ID'd element called chart. So what we do is say document get element by ID. So remember, we're in JavaScript now. Everything on this side here is JavaScript. If you need to have a JavaScript tutorial, that's kind of beyond the scope of this tutorial series, but you can find plenty of information online about JavaScript and JavaScript tutorials. But at any rate, document.getElement by ID, passing in chart, that'll get us a reference to that paragraph. We want to, that paragraph element, we want to assign a new attribute. We'll call it execute.js. And we're going to make that be a function. And basically what we're doing here is setting up a function that can be called from Flexsim, from FlexScript, from triggers. And what do we want to do? We want those triggers to be able to pass some data. In our case, we're passing a string of JavaScript. Remember, that's what we created back in that onEntry trigger. So we'll be passing that in as data, and then we just want that data to be executed as if it was code. And conveniently, JavaScript provides this eval function, where you can pass it a string, and it will evaluate it as if it's JavaScript. And so if it's valid commands, it'll just go ahead and execute. So so that's it. Get element by ID, chart. Yeah. So remember now, the important parts are we've got an element with ID of chart, and it has an attribute on it called execute.js that we can pass some code to. All right, so back to this code here. FlexScript has this great command called call webscript method. Call webscript method is the magic that allows you to, from FlexScript, do something to a WebKit rendered HTML page. So the first thing you have to pass in is the view. We'll get to that in a minute. The next thing is the DOM ID. DOM is Document Object Model. It's a web term. It's basically just looking for the ID of the element in the HTML page that has the function that you want to call. So that's chart in our case. The method we're calling is execute.js. The next thing is what parameters do you want to pass to the execute.js function. And you have to tell FlexScript what kind of data you're passing. So there are these macros. Call webscript method, in our case string. We're going to pass a string. The string we're passing is JavaScript. And you could repeat this over and over if you had a WebScript method that took multiple input parameters. You would just kind of repeat this pattern over and over and over. It might not be string every time, it might be a number or something else, but in our case we've just got the 1. And when you're done, yeah, we only need the 1 parameter. We've only got that 1 JavaScript string that we're passing. And then when you're done, you do call web script method end. And that says, hey, there's no more input parameters I need to pass in. Okay, we're almost there. We'll keep this code. Whoops, I've got an error. Oh, of course I have an error. There's nothing there yet. Okay, yeah, well, let's talk about that. What do we pass in there? It needs a reference to the WebKit widget that's part of a user interface. So does that mean we need to pass this node in? Kind of. That's the node that owns the HTML. That's the actual WebKit widget. However, this GUI 2 under my model, that's the template. When I actually open the GUI, the live GUI, that belongs to, it's a copy of this one. Let me show you where it lives. If we go to the view tree, the active, there's this GUI 235 whatever. This is the live one. And it has an HTML4 widget underneath it, and that's the WebKit widget that we would actually want to call the web script method, whatever that was, call web script method. That's what we want to pass in there, is something from a live GUI, not the GUI template. So what we'd like to do in that case is get a reference to any live interfaces, Sankey diagrams that we have open. So we'll just get a reference to the active node. The best way is just with the node command. Active is always the first thing under view, so we can just use the index there. And then we'll want to do a little for loop. Let's say for int I is equal to the content of active. I is greater than 0, I minus minus. So we'll start at the back and loop our way forward. Okay, so we don't want to call this on every single open user interface, because some of them might be properties windows. They're not all Sankey diagram windows, right? So what we want to do is we'll check. The way that we'll do it now is kind of a simple way, but you can choose your own way later if you want. But we'll just go ahead and check a particular node. We'll say tree node HTML object is equal to, so remember we had that HTML4 WebKit widget in our GUI. So the GUI itself is this rank out of active I. Okay, so that gets us the HTML object. And so if the GUI that we're looking at has an HTML4 under it, then we'll call the web script method. So, you might want to have a more distinct name than HTML4. You might want to use some other kind of fingerprint to tell whether it's really one of your open Sankey diagrams. But this is pretty simple. It's what we'll do for this example. So for every open Sankey diagram, I'm going to call a web script method on it and pass in that object. Now it should take it. Yes. Okay, I think we're to a point where we can try it out. We're not done yet, and I'll show you why, if everything works according to plan. So we'll open it up. It's just empty initially. And as we run the model, ooh, it starts to populate. Yes, but look at this. It's not quite what we want. When we're calling create chart, remember we're passing the create chart command as the last thing. It looks like it's layering new charts, one on top of the other. We're getting very deep in all these charts. What we'd like to do, anytime we call create chart, it'd be great if we got rid of the old chart and re-rendered a new chart. There's probably better ways to do it if we really got to know the D3 JavaScript library. We could update that dynamically rather than destroying the chart and recreating it. But for purposes of this demonstration, we'll just go the easy route. It's not a D3 tutorial. It's a Flexsim tutorial. So let's go to our GUI. Get down to the bottom here. All right. So when we call create chart, we'd really like it to destroy the old chart and make a new chart without reopening the view, just refreshing that chart. So let's look at the create chart command. Okay, so just really quickly, here's the important part, is we're appending a new G to SVG every time we call create chart. Now, I mean, to understand what that means, you jump online, search for JavaScript, SVG, find out what G is. I mean, there's a lot going on, but essentially SVG is scalable vector graphics. It's got a file, not a file format, but a data format underneath it that that the D3 JavaScript library is using to draw those shapes in our chart. So there's the broad stroke overview for you. What we want to do, see right up here, so here's the create chart function. Here are a few things that happen initially. We actually want to move this right here where we're putting an SVG element into that chart paragraph. Let's just move that down here within create chart. So we'll append a new SVG every time, but that's because we're going to remove the old one. So I had to get online and poke around the D3 library a little bit to figure this out, and it's not the best way, but again, we're demonstrating how Flexsim and WebKit can interact. This isn't a hardcore demonstration of the D3 library, but you know, more power to you to figure that out and post your awesome results to the forum. All right, so in our case, let's declare a var called chart. And we'll steal this guy, and we'll just keep that reference to chart separate. And this is what I was able to find online. If we say chart, select SVG, so get any existing SVG element that might be in chart and remove it before we go ahead and add the new one and then draw all of the shapes in it. Now we can actually move this outside of the function because chart will never change. It's always that paragraph element. Okay, I think that's it. Let's try it out, make sure I didn't make any mistakes. Okay, as we continue to run the model now, let's just run. Look at that. It's not layering it on top of, one chart on top of another, but instead we actually have a dynamically changing chart. We're not quite done though. Watch what happens when I reset and run. That didn't quite look correct, did it? There's some strange things going on. Let's try it again. Reset, run. Yes, still some weirdness. Okay, so let's talk about that. When we reset, ideally we should see this chart get totally redrawn, but we don't have any reset code that does that. So also there are the nodes and the links that are in the JavaScript data here. They haven't been cleared out either. So they're still there, and as we then run the model again, we're going to be pushing new nodes and new links on that are often repeats of what was already in there, and that's why we're getting all of this over here. Okay, so some interesting things happening. Let's fix it. The way to fix it is in our onReset model trigger. Oh, must have opened here. Yes, on model reset. What we want to do is pass some JavaScript over to the HTML widget to have it refresh the data and redraw the table. Now let's grab this down here in the on entry. Remember, this is where we're looping through all the active views. If it's one of our Sankey diagrams, we want to call some JavaScript on it. We want to do the same thing when we reset the model. Meaning we want to loop through, find all the open diagrams, and do something. What do we want to do? Let's talk about it. Remember, we've got that energy data object, and there's a nodes attribute. One thing we'd like to do is just clear it out. Just make it an empty array. There's no more nodes. We've reset the model. There's no nodes yet. We'll add those as the model runs. Same thing with energydata.links. It's an array, but we want to just make it an empty array. There's nothing there. Then we'd want to create the chart again, passing in energy data. That'll redraw the chart, and it'll be totally blank when we reset the model. Okay, I've got a chart here. When I reset, it should go away. And now when I run the model, we should be starting from scratch. Okay, that does it. Good job, guys. You've made it through part 5 of the tutorial. We've got a Sankey diagram that updates dynamically as the model is running with the latest data available. Stay tuned. We're going to do part 6, where we will try to get this chart into the dashboard. So Flexsim has got these great dashboards. Back here, they're integrated with Flexsim's windowing system. You can basically put any kind of WebKit widget on here, do stuff. We're going to work our Sankey diagram into one of these, so stay tuned.